think the Black queer community, naturally, we cultivate so many trends in
Right.
the industry. And
Hmm.
because going back to the previous question, we have like all of these white men creative directors, but they're like white queer men.
Hmm.
But they don't
Yeah.
have the taste and the flavor and the originality as Black queer um, trendsetters. And I think that we set the marker for what fashion is, and everybody else kind of follows.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nails and Beauty Talk, the Style Crypt. I am your host, Asia the Bird. Today, we have a very special guest with us today. He is a pop culture and fashion content creator. Please welcome Mars Orbit. Hello, Mars, and welcome.
Hi, happy to be here. How's
Yes,
everyone? Or how are
yes,
you? I'm saying.
yes. I'm glad. I'm very, very good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Yes, glad to have you. So I want to go ahead and get started by asking where you're originally from and tell us a little about your upbringing.
So I am originally from Statesville, North Carolina, which is like 40 minutes outside of Charlotte. So I usually just say Charlotte because that's what people know.
Right.
And what was the second part of the question?
So tell us a little about your upbringing.
Oh, my upbringing. Okay, so I grew up in a country, in a neighborhood that was like surrounded by family. So I had my mom's house, but I also had a room in my grandma's house, and then my cousin lived up the street. So it was just very like close knit family bond
Hmm.
upbringing. And then I also had family that lived in the DMV. So in the summers, I would travel to Alexandria, Virginia to spend time with them, and then for holidays they would come down. So it was just kind of like I had a big family, so the upbringing was very exploratory because I had a lot of cousins and a lot of aunts and uncles. So like I was always entertained and always in something new.
Mm. Yeah, right. Absolutely. So tell us about like your school experience and what was like your school experience like as far as grade school, things like that.
So grade school was I went to a majority white high school, and I
Hmm.
didn't even realize this until I started teaching because I used to be a teacher in New York City. Because I hung out with like all black people at school, but when I look
Hmm.
back on that experience, I'm like, oh, I really went to an all white high school. Um, but high school was it was a great experience for the most part, and it really taught me to show up and be in places where you may not belong. Like I
Right.
was on the swim team, but I was the only black person on the swim team. I was on a dance team, but I was the only male on the dance team. So it's just kind of like I partook in things that kind of tried to exclude me and like made the best of it. So high school really, I don't know, left a mark in teaching me how to take up space
Mm.
and navigate and find your way.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. So what drew your interest into talking about like fashion and pop culture?
So my grandma was very into fashion, and I was like her shopping buddy because it got to a point where she couldn't walk. Well, she could walk, but when we would go shopping, like I would push her in a wheelchair because it would just take her forever. And I was
Mm.
like her shopping buddy. So we went to the mall, and I don't know if you're familiar with the store called Belk.
Mm-mm.
Belk is kind of like a Bloomingdale's or a Nordstrom, but it's like down south.
Oh
And
yeah, I know what you're talking about now.
that was
Belk.
like my grandma's favorite store,
Hmm.
and I kind of picked up on it early where I would just look at the way that she looked at clothes. Like she would pick up a garment and she would look at how it was sewn together, how the seams were, like how things were cut and tailored. Like she was really much into that. And I kind
Hmm.
of, that stuck with me. So that's kind of what piqued my interest in fashion. And then as I kind of got older and I got obsessed with pop culture, that's when it really exploded for me because I started buying magazines and music videos and MTV and BET, and it's just like I love like the music because I'm a music person too. But I really was interested in like who is making this outfit that Aaliyah is wearing,
Hmm.
who styled Aaliyah in this look. So that's kind of what piqued my interest. It went from my grandma instilling it, and then from me being obsessed with pop culture, just kind of like expanded on the idea.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Now, how would you describe your fashion style and aesthetic?
So I would describe my style as extreme minimalism, if that makes sense, with
Okay.
like a hint of goth, glam, and punk rock a little bit.
Hmm.
Because I love like simple whites and tans and grays, but I also like spikes and metals and
Hmm.
grunge and darkness. So I like a mix of those things. It just depends on what I feel like for that day. But those are like that's like the tipping point for me as far as my fashion and style aesthetic.
Mm. Yeah, I like your shirt. Like I like how it has a zipper with it.
Thank you, thank you. This is I found this at Zara, but it looked
Mm.
like Moschino to me, so I was like, I'm gonna buy this because it looks like Moschino.
Yeah, I want to get into in regards to the fashion industry. So, in regards to the fashion industry, we have seen creative directors and designers step down for brands such as Dries Van Noten, Valentino, Alexander McQueen, etc. So, in your perspective, how has that affected the fashion industry, and what shift do you see in the fashion industry considering art directors are stepping down from these high-end fashion brands or fashion houses?
So I think with some of these legendary houses losing their creative directors, I think it's gonna change fashion. It's gonna be like a double edged sword. Like using Dries Van Noten for example, that's his brand. Like
Right.
he cultivated and birthed that brand, and now that he's stepping down, it kind of makes way for the brand to shift and take on a new life, which I love because that means that I would hope that a new up and coming designer will have a chance to have their hand at Drees. But at the same time, it's just like when you have these brands that are birthed out of tradition from a certain person and they leave the house, it kind of like isolates the customer in a bit. So it's just like they are used to a certain aesthetic, they're used to a certain output, and they're not gonna particularly get that anymore. Looking at Alexander McQueen and their new creative director, and his name is Sean McGurr,
Mhm.
and Sarah Burton used to be the creative director, Alexander McQueen, and Sean McGurr's first show came down the runway, and everybody hated it. And I didn't like. I guess I hated it too. I hated it too. Um, but it's just kind of like because it really didn't follow the traditional house codes of Alexander McQueen,
Yeah.
and there are people like Rihanna and Beyonce, and they're wearing it, and it's kind of like getting people more acclimated to it. But at the same time, it's just kind of like you lose that foundation when you let new creative directors in. So I think it's like a give and take. Some people are very great at it. Some people are just
Mhm.
take the brand in a whole different direction. So it just depends on how the consumers react to it.
Yeah, yeah, I've been seeing, and even with Fashion Roman, he talked about how some art directors were stepping down from certain brands like Valentino, and there's a new director at Valentino, and even with like Alexander McQueen, like yeah, how you said Sean McGurr, and I love when Sarah Burton was the creative director of Alexander
Mm-hmm.
McQueen because especially the fall ready to wears were amazing to me. Like I just
Yeah.
love the tailoring, and it
Mm-hmm.
goes along with what Alexander McQueen represented, along with the having that drama and haute couture and that costume type design. So I
Mm-hmm.
like how with some creative directors how they stick true to the brand. Like if you look at Dale Roseberry, from Schiaparelli,
Mm-hmm.
Elsa Schiaparelli is about the surrealism, about the art form, of fashion. And so I like with Daniel and how he's consistent with what the brand represents. So I
Yeah.
think with the fashion industry, I think we're gonna see a shift, but it has to be a good shift in terms of consistency.
Yeah, like Daniel, that's a great example. So he's one of the people who does it right. Like he
Yeah.
sticks to the house codes, but he makes it very modern. But then
Hmm.
on the other hand, you have somebody like Alessandro. When he was at Gucci, he
Hmm.
took Gucci in a whole different direction, but it worked. So
Right.
it's just kind of like it's like a you take a risk and you see if it works. But I just think in Alexander McQueen's case, I don't know how long it's gonna work, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. We'll see about that. So in a TikTok video, you talked about the Curing Group having white creative directors of high-end fashion houses of Bottega, Gucci, Brioni, and Balenciaga. You
Mhm.
mentioned about the lack of diversity in the fashion industry, especially when it comes down to creative directors. So talk about the impact racism and lack of inclusivity has had on the fashion industry.
I think racism and lack of inclusivity has had a huge impact on fashion because it has kept a lot of people who are not white out of the space.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, knowing that like all of the major heritage houses are created directed by white men is an issue. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it just plays on white supremacy. They feel like
Mm-hmm.
that if you're not white and you're not male, that you cannot carry a heritage brand to
Right.
where it's supposed to go. And I know that's not true. Like, I have seen black people and women like carry brands and catapult them to like a whole different standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I don't know, I just feel that if you're not white and male, you don't get many chances to try to carry a house to where it needs to be. And I think that kind of it puts a marker, it puts a damper on the fashion industry. Like even using Rihanna for example, when Rihanna had Fenty at the LVMH, when they gave her like a designer brand,
Right.
and they only let it live for like 2.5 years. Like they didn't even give her time to cultivate a customer base and
Right.
figure out where she wanted her brand to go before they just ultimately like chopped it and got rid of it. But it's
Yeah.
just kind of like you used to have people like Demna at Balenciaga. Demna can
Mm-hmm.
fuck up 50 times over and he's still going to be able to put out more collections. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like white supremacy shows up in ways of not being fair on the playing field. So it would be
Absolutely.
nice to have a Martin Rose at Louis Vuitton, Martine Rose, excuse me, Martine Rose at Louis Vuitton, a black woman doing menswear and elevating and catapulting the brand, but they don't get it. They're just so stuck on being not inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is also too, like with the fashion industry, is that like racism does play a role as to why the fashion industry, the way it, especially in regards to, the lack of diversity and inclusivity and things like that, and it's mostly in the more you sit back and observe, it is dominated by white men.
Hmm.
And so it's something that's very, very important as far as seeing black creative directors, take hold on to like these fashion houses and elevate it, like Pharrell with
Hmm.
like Louis Vuitton or you look at Olivier Rosting from he's the creative director of Balmain, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
there has to be more diversity and representation as far as how, in certain ways of how to take the brand further and higher heights.
Yeah, I agree, and it's like, and when people are given chances, it just elevates the brand. Like, look at Maximilian Davis at Ferragamo.
Mhm.
Ferragamo has never gotten this much press and celebrity
Mhm.
endorsement in years. And
Exactly.
he is doing great things at Ferragamo. Like he's putting
Yeah.
Ferragamo back, single handedly putting them back on the map. Same with Pharrell, like you said, Louis Vuitton. Even when Virgil was at Louis Vuitton, like they were doing amazing things and taking the brand in a different direction. So I don't know why higher ups feel like they want to just stick with white men and be safe. It's just I don't know. It kind of makes fashion boring too because you're getting the same perspective over and over and over. Like, let's mix it up a little bit. Let's put some different people in different positions, and let people have their pick and their taste of different things.
Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. I want to move on and talk about in terms of the LGBTQ community. So one of my most favorite shows is RuPaul's Drag Race.
Hmm.
In the show, they not only showcase their talent, but they also showcase different styles of artistry and creativity as far as like fashion and things of that nature. So not only that, of course, we see the ballroom scene has had an influence in the LGBTQ community, especially with fashion and things like
Hmm.
that, with the categories and stuff like that. I seen a documentary called Paris is Burning, and I love the documentary
Hmm.
so much.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I want to get into in terms of this question. So being a part of the LGBTQ community, what is your perspective on the LGBTQ community's impact on art, beauty, and fashion?
I think the impact is major. I feel that the queer community, we start a lot of the trends and we don't get the credit because when we start the trend, it's often taken or stolen and then catapulted into another hemisphere and not giving credit to where it comes from. Um, but I want to speak to the Black queer community in
Hmm.
general. I think the Black queer community, we create naturally we cultivate so many trends in
Right.
the industry. And
Hmm.
because you like going back to the previous question, we have like all of these white men creative directors, but they're like white queer men.
Hmm.
But they don't
Yeah.
have the taste and the flavor and the originality as black queer um, trendsetters. And I think that we set the marker for what fashion is, and everybody else kind of follows.
Hmm. Yeah, right, exactly. When you look at like figures like Coleman Domingo, like Coleman Domingo has been slaying it with his looks. You see
Hmm.
Andre Leon Talley with what he represented when he was alive, and it's just really really cool to see that Black people can exude excellence through fashion and through style.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing to see that, especially like other, figures, especially in the LGBTQ community, like I said, with the ballroom, with the
Hmm.
fashion categories. And so,
The ballroom is in every single thing.
right.
Like it's in all facets of fashion and beauty. Even if you look at the way that women are doing their makeup, like it's all of those trends are kind of set in ballroom. Which, and I love that ballroom is everywhere now, but it's just kind of like give credit and
Hmm.
recognition to where you got things from, and keep it alive because it has birthed so much in the art and fashion space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I look at different drag queens like Shea Coulee. You look at Monet Exchange. You look at
Hmm.
Black drag queens who have paved the way and really really set the tone for Drag Race. In terms of their style and what they represent and just their
Hmm.
creativity. And I love like seeing Black excellence. In the
Absolutely.
LGBT community.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to get into in terms of Angelina Talley. So it leads me to this next question.
Okay.
So Angelina Talley made a huge staple in the fashion industry, not only with him being a wealth of knowledge, but also using his influence, to include Black models and highlight Black designers. So in
Hmm.
what ways has Angelina Talley influenced you in fashion and being a creative?
So Andre has influenced me tremendously, um, because I look at the end of his life and how he was treated so poorly and how he was like basically in debt, but he birthed so much knowledge into Vogue and just fashion internationally. And for him to not be taken care of, that just really bothered me.
Yeah,
So
me
he
too.
influenced me more so because my main thing with my fashion content is to make sure that people that we as black fashion creatives and black fashion art beauty whatever in general we're not forgotten. and
Yeah,
um and not only are we not forgotten, but we are also like compensated and rewarded for the things that we do in this space. And
exactly.
it just really his legacy for me is to make sure that it doesn't happen to me, that it doesn't happen to other black creators. When things happen, and it can be the smallest thing. Like I remember when recently Marc Jacobs he started wearing like the long nails, right?
Right. Yeah, I seen that.
And he's wearing these nails based off of a Hispanic content creator. But we all know that those long nails that comes from like black women and ballroom. Like that's where
Hmm.
that trend comes from. So it's just kind of like when we call those things out because back years ago that was called ghetto, and
Hmm.
that's not something that you do. That's not how you carry yourself. But now all of a sudden it's like couture and chic and trendy. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
like Andre was the type of person who would call those things out. And he will also give power to where things were started. Like he will often talk about his grandma, his aunties wearing the big
Right.
church hats and getting tailored and all those things. And you see
Hmm.
all of those things now in fashion as couture high end. But you don't
Hmm.
give credit to where they come from. And Andre, his legacy has inspired me to be vocal,
Me
um,
too.
and be seen and be visible and take up space because you are allowed to do so. We
Hmm.
are allowed to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just in terms of ballroom, in terms of the nails. I think it's Black women in general.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Black American culture has really made a staple in the nail industry. And I'm a nail
Yeah.
artist, and the thing is that we're still as black women fighting for credibility in the nail industry in terms of our
Yes.
contributions and being respected in the beauty and nail space.
Yeah.
And the thing is that what I really appreciate what Andre represented, he exuded black excellence. He exuded a wealth of knowledge. And I think definitely, absolutely, Vogue would not be where it's at if it was for Andre. He
Yeah, like,
elevated to a
and
whole
when
nother
Tor
level.
didn't know, she didn't know half the shit that she knows now because Andre fed
Exactly.
that knowledge into her.
Hmm.
So, and that's another thing too. It's just kind of like we can be in certain spaces and have the knowledge and be the most intelligent in the room, but we still don't get the reverence. Like he should have been editor in chief of Vogue,
Hmm.
not Anna. If he's telling her everything she knows, so
Hmm.
yeah, it just pisses me off.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly. I believe definitely that he deserved way better. And the thing is that people are waiting until he is gone to pay
Mhm.
homage to him. Like I'm like, why didn't you do that when he was alive?
Right?
You know what I'm saying? Especially a time where he was at like his lowest point in his life, and it was just unfortunate.
Yeah, it was, and he's gone now, and what's done to him cannot be changed. But I think moving forward, we as Black creatives need to like be very weary of the industries that we're in and make sure that we're taken care of by any means necessary.
Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. So I want to get into as far as the Met Gala. So we've recently
Okay.
seen the Met Gala, which happened back in May. What is your thoughts in terms of the Met Gala, and what were some of your favorite looks?
The Met Gala this year, the theme was very confusing for a lot of people. Like even myself, I had to sit down and do research and like really figure out what it meant. So
Hmm.
I knew if that was confusing to me, I knew it would be confusing to a lot of people.
Hmm.
As far as the turnout, I thought it was okay. Like we didn't have our heavy hitters. Like I was really looking forward to see what Rihanna was going to do with this pink
Yeah,
hair.
right.
I really wanted to see
Yeah,
what
me
was going
too.
to happen with that. I thought Beyonce would show up in a Western type of look. She
Yeah.
didn't come. So it's just like the people that I look forward to being there really didn't come. But there were some people that really came and really gagged me. Tyler was one of those people. The Balmain with the sand that was very clever.
Hmm.
Balmain the entire night in general, they did a really great job on. Olivier did a really great job on all of his clients. Um, I really loved what Zach Posen did with Gap, the denim Divine Joy.
Hmm.
That denim piece was excellent. I really loved what's the content creator's name? He wore Robert One. I can't think of his name right now. I always Wisdom K. Wisdom
Yeah,
K.
Wisdom K.
Wisdom K looks great. Um Usher, disappointing. Um I don't know. Cardi B, disappointing. I just feel like we're in a point now where it's just kind of like I think it's more about the impact than being like overly dramatic and not leaving any impact. And I feel like the looks that were more demure and toned down left a big impact, and the looks that were supposed to be grand and all
Hmm.
over the place just kind of fell flat.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that I liked Mindy Collins' look. Um, her look was very, very like, flowy, and it had like that representation of like sand. And I also liked, who was another person I like? I like Zendaya's looks. I think Zendaya
Oh,
look was,
absolutely,
Law slayed that.
yeah. I love that she reached back to because when I was predicting what looks would come out, I just knew people were going to wear John Galliano. So I
Hmm.
love that Zendaya went into the archives and wore John Galliano. That was very, very clever of her in law.
Hmm. Yeah, I could totally agree with that. Now, if you had a top four list of your favorite black designers, who would they be and why?
Um, Martine Rose.
Hmm.
I love Martine Rose because she just has a perspective on fashion that I feel has been missed for so long. She plays well with androgyny, whereas male and female form can be in her clothes and both look spectacular and fab. And she brings like this grungy London aesthetic that I love. I love it. And it's
Hmm.
also very sporty, so it's like comfy too. So she covers all bases when it comes to menswear in particular.
Hmm.
So love Martine Rose. Love Telfar.
Mm-hmm.
I know everyone is obsessed with their tote bags, but I really love their apparel, like their denim and their
Mm-hmm.
sweats and just the cuts and the diversity and the size inclusivity. I love that. I love Telfar. I also love Bianca Saunders. She's
Mm-hmm.
doing great things in menswear, and it really brings me joy with her and Martine Rose to see Black women designing menswear. Like that's kind of unheard of, and I really, really love that. I think it brings a fresh new perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
Christopher John Rogers
Yeah.
is one of my all-time favorites. More so because he gives me Heritage House. Like I truly believe that he's going to be like the first Black Heritage House because
Mm-hmm.
his tailoring, his eye, his execution, his attention to detail, like he's really taking fashion from Black designers to an elevated level.
Yeah,
Was that four?
absolutely. Yeah, that was four.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah, that was four. I want to get into this next question. So, how much of an impact do you think Black American culture has had on the fashion industry?
all of it. All of it is from Black American culture in specifically, from going back to slavery times and some of our ancestors being tailors and making clothes not only for themselves and their families but also their owners' families and who they work for. That's just something that, and even going back to Africa and looking at the way they would make clothes and jewelry and the way we wore things, the way we
Right,
communicated through our braids and our hair,
right.
anything that Black people and Black Americans and just Black people all over the globe have transcended fashion in a natural way out of being resourceful. Because a lot of things I feel that, especially from a Black American experience, a lot of things that we do in fashion is out of necessity or
Hmm.
not having access to things like
Right.
even looking at I planned a photo shoot a couple of months ago and
Hmm.
I ordered like some custom nails and I wanted like I sent them a picture of Coco from SWV when she had the long curved nail.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Um and I was like, I want this shape. And the nail artist basically had to like make it from scratch because she couldn't like just buy the nail and paint it. Like she had to like curve it and shape it.
Hmm.
And but if you look back at old pictures of Black people with long nails, that is like the way that's naturally how our nails grow, like with a curve. And we needed those nails out of a necessity. That's how they were created. So I just think that's what makes it beautiful is that it comes natural to us and everyone else kind of follows that and tries to mimic it, but it just doesn't come across as authentic. And I think that's
Hmm.
what keeps the fashion industry going is what we bring to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think definitely we make a huge impact as far as with fashion, especially in the beauty industry, especially the
Hmm.
nail industry. Like I said, with Black American women, making, setting trends in the nail industry,
Hmm.
wearing different nail styles. And, the thing is that also with hip hop too, hip hop has played a major influence in fashion.
Absolutely.
Like, the bucket hats and, the jewelry and, the Timberland boots, the sneakers, sneakerhead culture was
Yeah,
catapulted by Black Americans,
it was. And
and
it wasn't until like social media, like before social media, I only saw Black people in the Tims and the bamboo earrings and the long iced out nails. Like I didn't see that
right,
on anybody else. And I think social media made it more of like a thing where you could like see things and kind of copy and mimic it.
right.
But I didn't see it anywhere else. But I see it everywhere now, everywhere,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and
especially on white people.
that's the thing. Like, like how you said, like when we wore it, it was seen as ghetto, it was hood, it was ratchet. But
Hmm.
when other people do it, it's trendy, it's the new hot trend, it's the new hot thing, and it's like, well,
Hmm.
hold on now, like you got it from Black Americans, you know what I mean?
Right,
And so that's
exactly.
the thing. Even with like music, we started every genre of music as Black Americans.
Yeah,
So, I definitely think even with fashion, we deserve a lot more credit, in regards to the fashion industry of how much of an impact we've really made.
yeah, I agree. Especially like when you just said that, I thought about one thing in fashion that will never go out of style is the suit
Right.
and the way that Black people have tailored and contributed to the conversation of a well tailored suit. It could
Hmm.
not be. looked down upon because it changed everything. Even what's his name in Harlem? I'm sorry, these names are leaving my
Dapper
brain.
Dan.
Dapper Dan, like Dapper Dan was making replicas that looked better than the actual products.
Right.
And people were gravitating towards it. And he was making a lane for us to be a part of couture and designer. And that for them to come years later and try to replicate his replica, it's just like, wow, like we start and we're the trendsetters and we always will be. And I
Absolutely.
just want us to be treated fairly and compensated for it when ideas are stolen or borrowed from. Because I don't mind people borrowing and taking and appreciating our culture. I don't mind that. But don't steal it. Like pull us in the rooms, collab with us, get our expertise, like get our approval and things that represent us, so that you're doing it correctly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, most definitely. And I think another thing too, I think with us as Black people, we have to understand to be together more, as a people, not just here in America, but just across, just all around in terms of globally.
Yeah,
I think that when we build together and when we support each other, that helps, push things forward and be progressive.
yeah, I agree. I do think there needs to be more support just across the board in general, especially in the fashion and beauty space.
Hmm.
To be mindful of, if you are going to get your nails done, find a black nail artist. If you are going to buy designer, try to see if a black designer is making what you're going to buy from somebody else. I think it just takes a cognitive approach, and it takes a lot of effort, but I think it's worth it. I really
Hmm.
do.
Yeah, absolutely, most definitely. So I want to get into your podcast called Creative Creative. So tell us about
Mhm.
your podcast and what subjects you talk about.
So the Creative is a podcast where we talk about all things creative, as far as like your creative process, how you bring your imagination to life. And I created this podcast because I wanted a space for creatives to just talk about shit that is not always good. Because being a creative, as I'm sure you know, it's
Yeah,
not the easiest thing in the world to do. It's actually very hard,
yeah,
because it's like you have this idea in your brain, you want to bring it to life, but so much goes into that as far as time and resources and money.
yeah.
And a lot of the times you don't have them all at one time. Like you may have the time, but you don't have the
Mhm.
resources, or you may have the money, but you don't have the time to execute the idea. So I wanted to
Right.
create a platform to where I could talk to different creators about what their process is, how they navigate through certain things, and what is the outcome of their process, and to kind of be inspired by their stories, and to let the listener come in and see how creativity is done, because there's no rules to creativity either. So I wanted to create a show where the listener can kind of take part in different creative industries and listen to how things come to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how do you juggle being a content creator with life and mental health?
It is a struggle. It is definitely a struggle. Like it's something that I'm struggling with right now. I recently went to a psychiatrist because it was getting to the point where I'm like, I have, I can like have an idea. I
Hmm.
can do the research, and then when I sit down to like record the content about it, sometimes nothing will come out. So it's just kind of like, how am I doing all this work, and then when it's time for me to actually execute the idea, nothing's happening. So the psychiatrist was telling me, she was like, I think you should try antidepressants. So I tried antidepressants because I thought I had ADHD, because I have, my mind is in like 10 places at one time.
Hmm.
And I have friends who have been diagnosed with ADHD, and they take medicine for it, and they can, like, when they take their medicine, they're able to focus on one thing at a time. So I was like, I think I need to have the same thing. So I did the antidepressants, and it it did alleviate my mood. I will say that. Like it made me not give a fuck about a lot of things, but I'm naturally that type of way where I don't give a fuck naturally. So for medicine to elevate that, I was like, this is not it.
Right.
So I'm currently in the process of like seeing another psychiatrist to see like if I do have ADHD, and if I can be diagnosed where I can focus more, because I have so much going on. I do content, I do podcasts, I do fashion, I do styling. If
Hmm.
I could have something that could help me to focus more, I think that would like make my mental health a lot more positive. So it's
Mhm.
something that I'm struggling with, but it's also something that I'm constantly working to make better because it's just something I can't turn it off. So,
Mm. Yeah, that's understandable. Last but not least, where can people find you on social media and how can people support you and your content?
so you can find me on Instagram at Mars.orbit. You can find me on TikTok at Mars Orbit, but the O is a zero. You can find me on YouTube at Mars Orbit. You can find me on Threads at Mars Orbit. Mars.orbit, and where else am I? Twitter, Mars Orbit, where the O is a zero. And you can support me by listening to the Creative Podcast, watching my content, following me on all social media channels. And I also have a brand called Mars Orbit Universe, and you can shop that at marsorbit.co. We're going to have different drops coming throughout the year and next year. And I have some other projects coming up. So just interact with anything that I'm doing that shows me support, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mars, for jumping on. I really appreciate this conversation. Talking with you. I love what you're doing as far as talking about fashion, pop culture. Especially talking about the importance of making sure Black creators are seen and not forgotten. That's very, very important as well. In terms of especially with keeping Andre Leon Tai's legacy alive. So I really appreciate this chat and just thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for staying on my ass about getting back to your email. Like I said, my mind be in 20 different places, so I really, really appreciate that. And I had a good time here, so I enjoyed this. Thank you so much, and good luck on your podcast.
Yes, thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Be sure to click the bells for notifications. Also, follow me on social media platforms and be on the lookout for more interviews involving fashion, style, and fashion history. Take care and stay stylish. Bye bye.